Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Gary Salman. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Black Talon Security, and welcome to our presentation on 10 ways to build a ransomware resilient practice. I just want to take a moment to give a nice shout out to See-Through Reports and thank them for hosting this webinar. This is some really important and timely information. I'm sure most of you are seeing what's going on in the news, and it appears we can't turn on the news or read an article and have it not be related to some type of cyber event, whether it's a regional event, national or international event. So I'm going to spend about an hour with you, and we're going to really help you better understand what is going on in the cyber world, right? Go through the facts and actually what's happening versus theoretical and hypothetical scenarios. So let me start with a little bit of background on myself. I've actually been in the healthcare IT space for about 30 years. I started my career as a database programmer. I built one of the very first oral and maxillofacial surgery practice management applications back in the late 90s. I then kind of had a vision of hosting this data in the cloud in the late 90s and said, why am I still selling servers and things like that? Why can't these practices and healthcare orgs run it through the internet? And I built out a data center just north of New York City. And by 2002, I had thousands of users running practice management software over the internet. When people barely had internet connections that were much faster than dial-up speed. And then that was kind of my introduction into cybersecurity, because we had actually just deployed a state-of-the-art Cisco solution to try and prevent intrusions into that environment. That intrusion detection system actually went off. It locked out thousands of users. And it turned out that someone attempted to break into the network. It was successful at stopping the attack, but that's when I realized, whoa, security is a real thing. Ransomware didn't exist back then, but the intrusions into these networks, potentially accessing data, was obviously prevalent even back then. So fast forward to where we are today. Obviously, cyber threats are a really significant concern for just about every type of business, especially those in the healthcare space. And I'm really going to be focusing in on how you can protect your practice, your business, et cetera, from these types of events. I also have 18 years of law enforcement experience. So if you think about what I do, I'm dealing with pretty hardcore criminals on a constant basis. They may not be the violent type per se, but they're causing significant damage to businesses of all types and sizes. Some businesses can't recover from them and actually go out. So we're gonna, really help you better understand, who this criminal element is, what they're doing, the types of attacks they're executing, some of the weaknesses that they're exploiting, et cetera. So a little bit about what I actually do, so you have a good understanding. I focus on three primary areas. One is defense, the other is offense, and then the third is what's called incident response. Incident response is really when a business calls us and says, hey, I got your name from a friend, a colleague off the internet, and we got hit with ransomware, or our email system's been compromised. Can you help? And we help them recover. The offense and the defense, we're going to cover a lot during this presentation. Those are two methodologies that you would be able to use to try and protect your network. Offensive things are items like penetration testing, which we'll talk about, cybersecurity awareness training, vulnerability scanning. Defensive technologies are technologies that are on your computer or computers that react to a threat, right? Using usually AI type technology. So we'll go ahead and get started with the presentation. All right. Okay. All right, so let's get started. So for our learning objectives for today, I'm going to really talk to you about how you can implement stronger preventative measures. Some of the things that I'm going to talk about are going to be tough to digest, right? These are just real world stories about colleagues, businesses, practices that are being hit. And I get it. Sometimes it's not what you want to hear, but it's the reality of where we are in the cyber world. So I'm going to talk to you about how you can actually implement preventative measures to try and prevent these intrusions. We're going to walk you through really explanations of various types of cyber attacks and their impact, the inability to, practice properly, to see patients. I get it. If you're reviewing x-rays, things like that, it's a little different. But if your technology doesn't work, that could put you in a precarious situation also. We'll talk about the importance of cybersecurity awareness training. That's a huge component of minimizing risk to help you minimize the chances of an intrusion into your network through things like phishing and spear phishing. We're going to talk about common trends. One thing about the cyber world is it is literally changing every single day, right? Hackers are coming up with new methodologies, new tactics, new techniques to breach these networks. And it is very important to try and stay on par or ahead of them as much as possible. And then we're going to help you understand the difference between an IT company and a cybersecurity company, because I think that's a big problem in the healthcare space right now, is everyone believes, hey, my IT resources are taking care of my security. And then they turn around, they're hit by ransomware or their network's been compromised and all their patient data has been extracted. And then they're like, whoa, I thought I had proper protections in place. And they turn around and they realize that they actually did not. All right. So one of the things that I always like to say is, how secure do you actually feel? And I get it. This is kind of a loaded question, but let's evaluate it. Where do you think you are? So first is not sure, I'm about to find out. The second one is, I know I'm not secure. Third is, I think I'm moderately secure. I'm being told that I'm in a pretty good place. And the fourth one is, I am totally locked down. No one can touch my network. I am good to go. And I think as a healthcare entity, this is a really good exercise that you should go through. You should do kind of what I like to call a gut check. Where do you think you really are from a security perspective, and just be honest with yourself. So let's define cybersecurity, because I think this is really important. Understand that there is no official definition of this. This is the definition that I wrote based on my experiences dealing with, thousands of healthcare entities and, hundreds of ransomware attacks. Cybersecurity is a multi-tiered approach that incorporates credentialed security experts, tools, and technology to protect data and businesses from exploitation by criminal entities. I think at a very high level, that's really what it's about, right? How do we evaluate these computers that you are using? How do we determine the risk associated with each of those computers and devices? And then how do we prevent intrusions into these devices, which ultimately lead to the exploitation of your records, your patient data, et cetera? So let's start by defining ransomware, because I think a lot of people have a general understanding of what ransomware is, but let's really dig into what ransomware is, what it does, and its impact. So ransomware is delivered to your network in one of two primary ways. The first is through what I like to call click risk. This is where yourself, or if you have someone working for you, is clicking on links, opening attachments, and those links and attachments have been sent to you by hackers. And by clicking on a link or downloading an attachment and opening it, you're actually installing the ransomware code for them. The other way is through what's called a vulnerability. A vulnerability could be a flaw in a piece of software on your computer, a flaw in a piece of software on your firewall, a printer, a device on your network that hackers are going to find, exploit, and then use that exploit to gain access to the device. We are going to cover this in a lot more detail, so don't worry about it. So what does ransomware actually do when it gets onto your network? Well, the first thing it typically does is it will steal all of your data. So the hacker's primary goal right now is to steal as much data as possible, especially for healthcare entities. They know that if you lose your patient data and it's stolen by the hackers, you have very significant legal and compliance issues you're going to deal with. And they will use the theft of that data against you to extort you. And I will explain that in a little more detail shortly. They will then encrypt your data, which basically means they will put a lock on every single piece of data on your computer. They will often get into your backups and destroy your backups. And what this ransomware code does is it locks the data, and you can kind of see the files that you need there. But when you go to open them, you can't open them because the hackers have encrypted or locked them. The only way to get your data back is either to restore it from a backup, but understand that most time the hackers have also stolen your data, or pay the ransom, right? And then the hackers will provide the keys to unlock the data. I will tell you that almost every ransomware event we've dealt with over the last couple months, the ransomware demands are way over $100,000. The last two cases, the ransomware demand was $680,000 and $800,000 against healthcare entities. So understand that this is ramping up dramatically. If you look back just a couple of years ago, it wasn't uncommon to see a ransomware demand of $5,000 to $25,000. Right. The challenge here with the theft of your patient data is you have HIPAA laws, you have state laws that you're going to have to deal with if your patient data is stolen. What the hackers will do is they will take that data, and if you don't pay the ransom demand, they will sell or leak the data on their dark web websites. They're called leak sites. And what they'll do there is they'll list the name of you. They'll indicate who you are, what business you're in on this leak site, and I will show this to you. And then it will also indicate how much data they stole from you, and then they will start publishing your patient data, right? For anyone that has access to those sites to view, someone like me, law enforcement, or other criminal entities. The other thing we're seeing now is attorneys. They're starting to look at these leak sites also to see if they can find the names of patients, contact those patients, and then start initiating class action lawsuits against those healthcare entities. I will also tell you that ransomware pretty much destroys the computers in the environment. In many cases, it damages the operating system. Also understand that it is a network compromise. So the hackers often backdoor these computers, and they have the ability to gain access back into the network with multiple technologies. The other thing is, for you, it damages your reputation. When you have to report on these types of events, it becomes a public disclosure. People Google your name, and they're going to see, your name tagged to the Office of Civil Rights, et cetera. And it's a problem from a reputational perspective. In fact, most cyber insurance policies now help with reputational harm, hiring PR companies, et cetera, to try and minimize the reputational damage that may occur. All right, so who's targeting us? So understand that most of these attacks are not coming from within the United States. It's extremely rare. I've personally never seen it, but it does happen on occasion. Most of these attacks are coming from countries like Russia, Ukraine, North Korea, China, Iran. Most of the ransomware does in fact come from Russia. Unfortunately, Ukraine has been heavily involved in that as well. When the war kicked off between the two countries, there was an immediate drop in ransomware events because these two countries were now focusing on attacking one another, and often recruited those hackers to conduct offensive operations against the other party. So you can see here, this is an article from May 16th, Russian ransomware affiliate charged with attacks on critical infrastructure. And on the right-hand side, you see the Department of Justice and Federal Bureau of Investigations posting, according to a Justice Department press release and unsealed indictments in New Jersey and the District of Columbia, Medvedev worked with at least 3 ransom gangs in attacks against healthcare and law enforcement organizations. Okay, so Lockbit, who he had an affiliation with, is the name of a ransomware gang. They are one of the most prolific gangs out there. They cause a tremendous amount of destruction. And I've personally seen them do significant damage to healthcare entities of all sizes. All right, so understand that, FBI, other government agencies often know who these people are, often very difficult to extradite them back to the US though. All right, so this is just a really great article that came out from Advisen talking about cyber risk in 2023. It talks about, what small businesses consider to be, one of the riskiest endeavors of running a business. And down at the bottom, it says it is also the risk small business cite as their top concern, especially regards the technology and software they rely upon to run their operations. Failure of digital supply chains or cloud service ranked 3rd for respondents. So most business owners, regardless of the type of business, are now realizing it's not a fire, it's not a flood, it's not a malpractice claim, right? The likelihood of an event occurring is probably a cyber event, right? If I had to list all of those out and rank them from high to low, right? How many people have their businesses burned down, right? How many, healthcare providers actually get, sued? But the likelihood of a cyber event is much higher. I mean, just look in the dental space. There's dental space is probably thousands of malpractice claims a year, and I'd be willing to bet there's tens of thousands of cyber events in the same industry. So let's do a little myth or fact. I think this is a great way of getting you to kind of think about what you're doing with your technology and whether or not you think you're secure or not. So myth or fact, all my data is in the cloud. I don't need to worry about security. And this is one of the most common things that I hear healthcare providers saying. Myth, right? So one of the challenges is this. I'm a huge proponent of cloud technology, so don't misunderstand this, but hackers do know where the data is, right? They share this data on dark web websites, through chats, through other social media channels like secure text messaging. So they're all communicating together to try and figure out how do they target where the data is. So they know where healthcare data is. Can't just say, well, I'm just a dentist, or I'm just a radiologist, or I own a small plastic surgery practice, right? You get the idea. You have to understand that the hackers know where all this data is rolling up and often target it. But one of the big issues that I'm seeing with the cloud technology is if hackers get into your device, the hacker gains a presence on your laptop, for instance, and you're using that laptop to access the cloud technology. The hackers will sit there and watch what you're doing, right? They will install screen sharing software. And when you're not paying attention or it's late at night and your laptop's on, they will open up your browser. They will look at the browsing history, and they will typically gain access to your cloud technology. I have some slides on this, so we're going to go into that in a little bit more detail. But understand, your laptop, your network can be the conduit to the cloud, and the hackers will leverage your computers to get into the cloud. Okay, myth or fact, Macs don't get ransomware. So this is interesting. A lot of people say this. So, my apologies. Let's look at this article. So April 16th, Lockbit ransomware encryptors found targeting Mac devices. So this article came out, and Lockbit, we just spoke about them, basically said, hey, we think we figured out a way to deploy ransomware on Macs. They did actually respond to this author and this writer, and they said, look, we're really close. In full disclosure, full disclosure by a criminal, we're not quite there yet, but they said over the next couple of months, they would be able to deploy ransomware on Mac devices. Obviously Apple is very strong with their security, but it is in fact a cat and mouse game, and we're seeing more and more malware being specifically built for the Mac OS. All right, so myth or fact, my IT company said my next generation antivirus software has me protected. I can't tell you how many times I've heard and seen this where businesses, healthcare entities have said, oh, I was worried about cybersecurity, so my IT company upgraded me to the next generation of antivirus software, and they said, can't get ransomware, you'll be completely fine. So big problem, right? The second someone tells you that the technology they deployed in your environment, on your laptop, on your computer, on your network, depending on the size of your organization, the second they tell you that you can't get any of this stuff, you need to find a new IT vendor. There's no piece of technology that is anywhere near being 100% effective. Right. So one of the challenges we're seeing right now, and we don't need to go into all the technical details on this, but this is just to kind of show you what's going on, is a lot of this more quote unquote advanced technology is now being defeated by the hackers, right? Understanding that this next generation antivirus software is triggering once a hacker or malicious code has already made it into your environment and is trying to block it. So hackers are now deploying software that literally kills the antivirus software on your machine, leaving it defenseless. right? And a lot of people have argued with me that, oh, they can't do that. The software has tamper-proof capabilities. Only, someone in my IT company can actually take that software off. I've personally seen it now where hackers have, in fact, been able to kill the antivirus software on a computer, on a server, and then kind of leaving that computer naked, for the lack of a better word. All right, myth or fact, I have cloud backup. So if I get hit with ransomware, I can recover quickly. So we talked about this a little bit already. Backups are critical, right? I tell people back up your data to the cloud, back it up to an external hard drive, put that external hard drive in a safe or in a desk drawer, whatever. But understand that hackers will still steal your data. And that's where you have compliance nightmares. In fact, most law firms will tell you if you're a healthcare entity and the hacker stole your data, even if you have a viable backup to recover from, you're still going to have to pay the ransom, because you can't afford to have all of that data published on the dark web. Also understand that hackers will sit on your computer or your network for a couple of weeks, learning how you function, what systems you access, where and how you back up. And they know that if you have a viable backup, you may opt not to pay the ransom. So guess what they do? They figure out how to get into your backups and destroy them. All right, so this is a good one. My IT company told me I'm protected and to stop worrying. I'm laughing because I hear this all the time. People, doctors will literally attend my presentation and I see them texting away. And then they're like, oh, I brought up some of the things, you talked about. And they literally said to me, stop worrying, you're fine. The second someone tells you to stop worrying, right, you need to start worrying. This is your business. This is your livelihood, your reputation, and your job is to worry. So what we always say is trust but verify. If someone's telling you that they're actually, doing something, which we're going to talk about what this something is in a couple of minutes, that's great. But how do you actually know that? Right? If someone says to you, oh, we're scanning your network for vulnerabilities, and you're like, okay, that's great. Can't do that, right? You have to have this trust but verify. And the trust but verify comes into play when you engage a third party to actually do the verification process for you. So for argument's sake, you would hire a cyber company and they will come in and audit all of this stuff to determine whether or not you are in fact secure and whether or not some of the technologies that are supposed to be implemented into your environment are actually there and functioning properly. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about something that I like to call the broken mindset. Right? And these are just statements that doctors of, all, different verticals have said to me, over the years. I'm too small. I'm just, a one computer shop, or I just have a half a dozen computers. How the hackers ever going to find me? I talked to my IT guy. He's got my back. We're fine. I have insurance, right? I tell every client, buy cyber insurance. There's no guarantees that the security measures will prevent an intrusion. All right. But a lot of people are saying, you know what, I'm just going to buy the insurance policy. And if something happens, they'll pay out. Okay. But the ramifications, the long-term ramifications are way greater than they used to be. And if you're going to supplement cybersecurity solutions with, I misspoke. If you're going to replace cybersecurity solutions with cyber insurance, you're ultimately going to fail. The other big problem is if you do tap that insurance policy and they pay, you're probably not going to be insurable in the future, right? What insurance company is going to buy coverage after that breach? Because now everyone's worrying about class action lawsuits, right? We covered the firewall and the antivirus software already, so I think we're good there. But I also say you can't just give up, right? I've had a lot of doctors come up to me after these presentations like, you know what, there's nothing I can do. If they hit me, they hit me. That's completely the wrong mindset. You got to stand up for yourself and your livelihood. And the flip side of this whole thing is if you do the basic things from a security perspective that we're going to talk about, the likelihood of you being hit is extremely low, right? Hackers are typically opportunists, and they're not going to sit there and spend a lot of time pounding on your door, trying to break into your network. They're going to move on to the next victim. So what's the correct mindset? Well, I always like to say a goal without a plan is just a wish, right? You may have heard this before, but we have to flip our mindset around and we have to say to ourselves, you know what? I'm going to stand up for everything I've worked hard for. I'm going to protect my patients and my business. But it starts with a cybersecurity program. What I'd be willing to bet 99% of the folks on this call have is a piece of software, right? You don't have a program, you have a piece of software that you're relying on to protect your computer or computers. And you know what that typically is? It's a little icon down at the bottom of your screen that's blinking, showing you have antivirus software. That's not a program, that's just a piece of software, right? And that flows into the next one, which is, I can't piecemeal together a feel-good solution based on shelfware. Shelfware is the antivirus software. You go out, you buy some software, you install it on your computer, and you're like, whoo, it says cybersecurity on it. I'm totally secure. I'm good to go now. That's where you get jammed up, right? So my point is, there's not a single piece of hardware or software that is considered to be a solution, right? Cybersecurity is this multi-pronged approach, which we're going to talk about. And this segues into the next slide. And I will tell you, we're all guilty. People in the IT space and security world are all guilty of wanting to trust our tools. We believe we have the best tool out there. It uses AI and the most advanced machine learning and all these cool phrases. I'm going to put this on my computer, and if something happens, the magical AI technology, launches the magic pink unicorn and solves the problem. It just doesn't work that way, unfortunately, right? But we do get sucked into it, and security and IT professionals often, rely so heavily on these tools, and they're really, really good at convincing, their customers that this is the correct tool and this will prevent a cyber event from you. But I will tell you for a fact that doesn't work out all the time, or doesn't work out that well all the time. All right, so there are cases where, like we just discussed, the threat actor, the hackers can disable this technology. I will also tell you that the hackers can now buy a lot of the technology that you have on your computers right now that is designed to try and defend your device from an attack. They go out and buy the software, and they sit there and spend hours and days and weeks trying to figure out how to get around it. All right, so this is a big challenge right now. But in the end, what typically happens is you get lulled into this false sense of security because the person that's selling you this technology is doing a really good job at convincing you that this is all you need. So there are two primary facets to cybersecurity. There's the prevention side, which we're really going to focus on today, which is designed to try and identify where you have weaknesses in your environment, in your people, implement strategies to prevent an intrusion into your environment, and then putting plans in place to deal with something that unfortunately may have happened. Keep in mind, you could do everything right. You can have the best technology and hackers can still get through. As I alluded to before, it's usually a low probability, but you still have to have a plan. And then there's digital forensics and incident response, which is really talking about companies that help businesses like yours recover from a cyber event. That's for another presentation. So how am I being targeted? This is one of the biggest things that doctors like to debate with me. They're like, oh, do you think they're actually looking up a oral and maxillofacial radiologist in Atlanta, Georgia, and targeting me? And I'll say, you know what? I don't believe they're doing that. But often what happens is it's a crime of opportunity. So let me give you an example here. Let's just say you pull into the parking lot of this mall, you're on your cell phone, chatting away, you get out of the car, you close the door, and you walk into the mall and you just forgot to lock your car. So this criminal comes by and he starts popping the handles on all the doors. He gets to your car, pulls the handle, and boom, your car door opens. He sits in your front seat. He turns around, he looks back there, he sees that nice sweater that you laid over your pocketbook. He's like, you think I'm that stupid? Lifts up your sweater, goes through your wallet, grabs your driver's license, your credit cards, whatever else you have in there, opens your glove compartment, finds a set of keys to your house, whatever it might be, grabs your garage door opener off the visor. Not a great situation, right? But did he specifically target you when you pulled into the parking lot? Maybe, most likely not, right? This is how hackers function. They will scan the internet. They will scan millions of IP addresses, and every one of you has a unique IP address, like you have a unique phone number for your cell. And if they start scanning your modem at your house, your firewall, whatever you have, and they find vulnerabilities, their system lights up and they start picking away, right? They're like, oh, here's a weakness. Let me see if I can get through this firewall. Let me see if I can get through this, modem provided by your internet service provider. And if they're able to get through, then boom, they're on your device or devices pretty quickly. All right, so that's typically at a very high level how this works. So hackers break into your network in two primary ways. They exploit your people, which is known as social engineering, which we're going to cover. And then they exploit vulnerabilities, which are these defects or weaknesses in your technology. So in terms of exploiting people, many of you have heard these terms. Typically, they are known as phishing, spear phishing, and they're kind of wrapped under the category of social engineering. The challenge with phishing and spear phishing is if you fall victim to these attacks, you're giving up usernames, passwords, you're downloading something, you're installing something for the hackers. And when you give up access to your network to a hacker, the hacker then becomes you. And potentially within seconds, they have access to your technology. And a lot of people, and I deal with this very frequently, doctors will say to me, oh my gosh, I can't believe I clicked on that. I knew better. Or that email looks so good. I didn't realize that it was a spear phishing email. Or this is the big one. Let's just say for argument's sake, it's one of your clients, right? That are sending you x-rays. Their email system gets compromised. The hackers then see that they send a lot of emails back and forth to you. They then assume the identity of that, say, doctor. They create an email that looks identical to an email they've sent you previously. And instead of attaching, say, a Panorex, that's a JPEG, they attach what appears to be a Panorex, but it's an executable file. And you quickly look at it and it says Smith, John Panorex.exe. You don't process the exe as being an executable. You click on it, boom, the code runs and you get hit with ransomware. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this attack executed, and unfortunately, it's highly effective because when you see the name of a person you know and trust, someone you do business with, you lower your guard, right? And that's how you get caught. All right, let's talk about vulnerability exploitation. So you have vulnerabilities on firewalls, right? Firewalls have a piece of software in them that's designed to try and block attacks, allow information to leave the firewall, allow information to enter the firewall. And this software is coded by a human. Humans make mistakes when they code software. Hackers find these mistakes, scan your firewall. The scanning technology reveals that flaw in that piece of software, and then hackers typically would deploy a toolkit to try and exploit that vulnerability on that firewall to break into that firewall and gain access to the inside of the network. So this is why we're constantly seeing firewall vendors providing updates to their software because they realize they have an exploitable vulnerability. There are also vulnerabilities on the inside of your network. Every single person on this call has vulnerabilities on their computers, 100% guaranteed. Some of the vulnerabilities are low risk that the hackers can't do much or anything with. Some of the vulnerabilities are very high risk that within a couple of minutes, hackers can exploit that vulnerability and gain full access to your device without you knowing. All right, but understand these vulnerabilities, whether it's a vulnerability through the human where you're giving up access to the device, or a vulnerability through a piece of software where a toolkit is giving the hacker access. What ultimately happens is they get to the data. They get to your device, they get to your data, whether it's local or in the cloud. So kind of case in point here, this is from April. Google releases urgent Chrome update to fix actively exploited zero-day vulnerability. So starting around the day before, Google started to become aware of a flaw within their browser. And when individuals were visiting websites that had web servers that were designed to attack this vulnerability in Chrome. These unsuspecting victims were then getting hit with cyber attacks. So just the act of you opening up Chrome or really any browser that has an exploitable vulnerability, visiting a website, it could even be a legitimate website. And the act of visiting that website then causes a direct attack against your computer, which passes right through your firewall. It may often bypass your antivirus software. What happens next is you're now a victim too. What the hackers will do is they will infect some of these legitimate web servers that are delivering legitimate information to you, and they will infect them with this malicious code that will exploit the Chrome vulnerability or the Safari vulnerability or, Firefox, whatever browser you're using. So the problem here is if you're not using technology like vulnerability scanners, which we'll talk about in a minute, to determine whether or not you have this vulnerability in your browser, all of a sudden you're a victim too. Right. And this is where it gets a little tough to stomach, right? You're like, oh, I was just visiting a legitimate website. How the heck did that happen? That's how easy some of these attacks are executed. I hear a lot of people in the tech space say to their customers, oh, your computer sits behind a firewall. We don't worry about vulnerabilities. Okay, here's your perfect example of why that absolutely is a horrible thought process, right? That thought process was thrown out like 5 years ago, right? But a lot of people aren't up to date with the latest types of threats and how hackers exploit networks. And they're still relying on, their methodologies that they've been using for a long time, and they just don't work anymore. So what can you do to really help minimize the risk of a cyber attack against your business, your computer or computers? So it starts with something called a security risk assessment. This is when a credentialed security engineer works with you or someone from your organization to conduct an assessment. I say it has to be conducted live. There's plenty of free tools or cheap tools that you can go in and answer all these questions. But what I find in the healthcare space is 95% of people that answer these questions aren't even sure what they're really asking. Okay. So then all of a sudden you think you know the right answer, you're not sure. So you're just picking things and you're doing yourself a disservice. Typically, these assessments are based off of something called a cybersecurity framework, like HIPAA or NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And these organizations have basically put together a set of questions that they know need to be addressed to help reduce risk. So it helps, practices really explore where they have risk through questions and answers. So the security engineer will ask you a question. How are you doing your backup? Where's your data stored? Are you using encrypted email? Do you have remote access to your customers? Do you have remote access to your own computer? So if you're traveling, maybe you log into, your main site. This is a really, really important exercise to go through. And the other thing is, since you're working with electronic protected health information, EPHI, this is required under HIPAA. You have to do this. If you have a cyber event at your business and you haven't conducted an SRA, it puts you into a pretty precarious situation with the Office for Civil Rights that is going to investigate this. Cybersecurity awareness training. Our data shows that about 60% of cyber attacks, ransomware, email intrusions, things like that, are the result of untrained individuals, right? They're getting hit with phishing and spear phishing emails, and they're literally giving up their credentials, okay? Or they're clicking on these links or attachments that we've talked about a couple of times. Under federal law, under HIPAA, you have to train yourself or employees on the various forms of cyber attacks, such as social engineering attacks, things like that. If you have a cyber event, once again, the Office of Civil Rights will request documentation proving that you and your entire team have undergone this type of training, right? But the goal here is it educates and empowers you and any team members you may have to be able to identify these types of phishing and spear phishing attacks, so that way you can take action proactively. A lot of people are trying to implement software that does this autonomously. It's just not there yet. Is it effective for some types of attacks? Absolutely. Is it going to be better than a well-trained human? No. Okay. There's no AI technology or any type of email technology that beats a well-trained human at stopping these types of attacks. So you have to do this. This has to be ongoing. This isn't the typical check the compliance box for the year, I'm good to go. This is something that could save you hundreds of thousands of dollars, both from an operational standpoint, as well as legal and compliance fines. Vulnerability scanning. So many of you, especially if you work from home, probably actually don't have a firewall. You have a modem that your internet provider gives you. That modem may have very, very basic firewall capabilities or none at all. Now, you are a healthcare entity. You have EPHI or access to EPHI. If your computer gets hit and the government comes in and starts investigating it, and you say, well, yeah, I didn't know that I needed a firewall, or I thought I had one, or, I just have one computer and I don't need it. That doesn't fly, right? That doesn't work. You're not going to convince an investigator that you didn't need to have a firewall. Okay. It's the most basic concept from a security perspective. So even if you do have a firewall, that firewall has to be configured properly. Taking a firewall out of a box, plugging it into the wall and hooking your network cable into it and seeing all the lights blink, that is not a properly configured firewall, right? It needs to be configured by a security engineer. The other problem is, we talked about this trust but verify concept. You buy a firewall, someone configures it for you, you put it on your network, you see the lights blinking, you're like, whoo, I think I did everything Gary told me to do, except for one thing. That firewall has to be scanned for vulnerabilities every single day, okay? The rate at which these vulnerabilities are being discovered is accelerating rapidly. To put this into perspective, 2 years ago, the standard of care, right, was to scan firewalls quarterly, every 90 days. Then we were realizing, oh, that's not good because hackers are now finding vulnerabilities in 30 days. So now let's move to monthly scanning of firewalls. Okay, that was kind of a win, getting ahead of the hackers a little bit. And then we're like, ooh, the time to exploit, TTE, means the amount of time from when a hacker discovers a flaw in a piece of software until they build an exploit kit is now 10 days. So if you're scanning your firewalls every 30 days, conceptually, you could give the hackers 20 days to potentially find that vulnerability and exploit you. So by scanning on a daily basis, companies like cyber companies can determine whether or not your firewall is properly configured and then make recommendations on how to better secure that device. Internal vulnerability scanning, we are talking about laptops, servers, Windows-based tablets. What you really need to be doing with these devices is you need to be running a very specialized tool called a vulnerability scanner. This is not antivirus software. Never, ever allow someone to convince you that vulnerability scanning and antivirus software is the same thing. If they tell you that, you need to find a new IT person. They literally have no idea what they're talking about. Vulnerability scanning will identify, once again, these flaws in software or hardware on your computer that hackers can exploit to gain access to it. This must be done, pay attention to this, every 4 hours. That's where we are in the cyber world right now. There's a lot of IT companies that tell you, oh, we scan your network for vulnerabilities. And because you don't know what question to ask, all right, that sounds great. You guys are scanning for vulnerabilities. You got my back. Cool. Then you come to a presentation like this, and I will tell you that has to be done every 4 hours. So you go back to your IT company and they're like, oh, no, we just do that once a year. Okay. And that's when your stomach twists and you're like, wow, okay, now I really know what Gary was talking about, right? So these are the things that can really do a great job at protecting you from these intrusions and protect, your patient data. You have to deal with scanning your device for vulnerabilities every 4 hours. That is now the new standard of care. Penetration testing. This is something that is really no longer a nice to have, but it is a must have. Penetration testing is when ethical hackers who work for a cybersecurity company try and break into your network. They are simulating an attack from a cyber criminal, and they're using the same types of tools and techniques that a criminal would use. So it's really a simulation. And they're not using usernames and passwords, right? So they're not going to be like, oh, well, let me get the username and password to the firewall and just kind of break through that way. No, they're going to use tools and technologies, and they will assume that the hacker actually doesn't have your username and password, and they're going to try and break in. And if they're successful, then typically what happens is a meeting is called with your IT resource, letting them know, hey, here's how we broke in, here's how we did it. Here are the things we exposed, but most importantly, here's how to fix it. All right, this is a very, very impressive piece of technology. I recommend everyone deploys this right away. I will also tell you that you either can't get cyber insurance right now if you don't have this, or when you go to renew your policy, if this is not in place, you will not get insurance. Most carriers that provide cyber insurance are asking for you to prove that you have extended detection and response, which I'll explain in a second. And they are often demanding specific brands of XDR. They're not going to just say, check the box if you're using XDR. They're going to want to know, are you using brand A, B, or C? What is XDR? XDR is kind of the third generation of antivirus software. The first generation of antivirus software uses a dictionary of known threats, hundreds of thousands of known pieces of malware, etc. When that when that executable or that piece of malicious code comes into your computer, regular antivirus software will intercept it and say, hey, are you in my dictionary? Are you a known threat to me? And if the answer is yes, it typically blocks it. So what do the hackers do? They buy the same software that you have on your computer. They keep engineering their code until the antivirus software no longer detects it, and they release it to hundreds of thousands or millions of people. Then the second generation came out and said, you know what? I'm going to start leveraging artificial intelligence and start inspecting this code and trying to determine whether or not it is in fact malicious or suspicious or it's legit. And based on its analysis, it can issue a couple commands. It can tell the computer to allow it in. It can kill the code, or it might just isolate and say, I need a human to look at this. All right. That is relatively effective. That is called second generation. But what I really want to see you have is something called third generation. All right. This is known as extended detection and response. Extended detection and response further enhances capabilities through more advanced artificial intelligence, but it also does behavior analysis. So it's not just looking at that malicious code, it's also looking at what's going on with all of the other computers in the environment. All right, what is that malicious code trying to do? If all of a sudden the AI technology says, oh, it looks like someone is trying to move from computer 1 to computer 3 to computer 5, and I've never seen that behavior occur before in this environment because I'm constantly learning, it's going to isolate those machines and throw up its hand and says, hey, human, I need someone to investigate this. This does not appear to be normal behavior because this is how hackers work. They leapfrog from computer to computer. All right, so it's going to do a lot of behavior analysis. It can do these network isolation or initiate network isolation, which basically means it detects something on a computer. The AI doesn't like the detection through its analysis, and within a fraction of a second, it severs the network connection to all of the other computers. So conceptually, it's boxed that malicious code or that hacker into one machine and has shut the network connection off, right? The hacker loses the connection to that machine. It's very, very effective technology. It can also detect fileless malware, which is becoming more and more popular. That can occur through visiting a website where it downloads code into your computer, but it's not an executable. Like the code literally just flows into your machine. It's not like an executable where the executable is placed on your computer, then that executable has to be launched and installed in your machine. So traditional antivirus software that most of you have does not have the capability of detecting fileless malware, and the hackers know this, right? So there's more and more fileless malware out there. So the good thing about this XDR software is it can act autonomously 24/7, 365 days a year. So it's something that the insurance companies do and in fact want to see in your environment. And this is not expensive technology. It's usually going to cost you around $6 or $7, sometimes a little bit more per computer per month. Figuring your normal antivirus software probably costs you $2 or $3. So not a big jump for the significant gains in protection. So the other technology that is really revolutionizing the cyber world is something called vulnerability management, detection, and remediation. So when cyber companies come in and identify all the weaknesses on your computers, they then typically will turn a report over to you or your IT resources to fix all of the vulnerabilities that they've detected. Well, the problem is there's a lot of time and effort required to make those changes to the computer. So recently, we've been using it for about a year now. We are using a technology that autonomously detects the problems with your computer from a vulnerability perspective, and then applies the patch or the fix to eliminate that vulnerability. So conceptually, you know what we have now? We have self-healing networks. We can go from, hey, here's a problem that hackers can exploit, to, hey, guess what? A couple minutes, a couple hours, a day, that was autonomously fixed. You have nothing to worry about, right? Versus waiting 30 to 60 days for an IT resource to fix that vulnerability, with the understanding that the time to exploit is now 10 days. Okay, so this is one of the most powerful technologies out there right now at reducing technical risk. Find the problem and autonomously fix it without relying on really a human to sit there and figure out how to fix it themselves. This is an example. This is actually a orthodontic practice, 4 locations. I get it a little bit larger in size. And for months, this practice was not addressing their vulnerabilities, right? They had over 4,000 vulnerabilities, and we just constantly heard the IT company making excuses, telling the owners of the practice they didn't need to worry about this, they're wasting their time and money. And then finally, we called the practice like, look, you guys are just burning money with us at this point. However, we do have some new technology we would like for you to use. And within a 30-day period, their vulnerabilities went from 4,060 down to 840 and continued to trend downward thereafter. This is very much textbook in terms of the effectiveness of this type of technology. You really need to be in this game right now. You need to identify the vulnerabilities and have software automatically fix them. All right, so we also need to understand that when hackers get into your environment, they will install screen sharing software. I mentioned this at the beginning. The problem here is they will watch everything you are doing on your laptop. They will look at the emails that you're writing. They will look at the websites you're going to. They're going to watch your video calls, everything without you knowing. It's a huge problem, not only from a compliance and legal perspective, but from a personal perspective. When we find these tools in the environment, you know what the doctors do? They start to break down. They're literally realizing that everything they did on the computer was being watched, right? So you have this emotional component to it as well. These are the data leak sites that I talked to you about before. This is an actual screen capture that I grabbed when I went to the dark web. And you can see in the center of the screen, here's a dental practice that was hit by Lockbit, and they posted the data. You know, we are a dental practice devoted to restoring, preserving, enhancing the natural beauty of smiles. You get the idea. You click on that just like you would on a regular website, and it brings you to a list of files that the hackers stole from this practice. I want you to look at that red rectangle. These hackers stole 21 1.9 gigabytes of data. What are we talking about here? Probably every single piece of data on their server. Patient records, driver's license, insurance cards, PANs, periapicals, 2D, 3D images and photographs, everything. Okay, so think about this from a compliance and a legal perspective. This is kind of, unfortunately, the nightmare scenario. I will tell you that over 75% of the ransomware gangs do this exact or utilize this exact methodology where they steal the data and publish it. Here's a pediatric group, and obviously I put all these yellow boxes to protect this practice and these children, but the hackers are like, this practice didn't pay us the money we demanded. They start publishing all of these children's records. All right, so this is a case. This is one of the more infamous cases we did a little over a year ago. This was a multi-specialty practice up in New England, 6 providers, 6 locations, orthodontic, pediatric group. They got hit by ransomware. It shut down every single one of their computers for 2 weeks. The ransom demand was $2.4 million. Okay. The total financial impact was $1.1 million. The negotiations were successful by our company, and we were able to get the ransom demand down significantly. But in the end, they still had to pay millions, $1.1 million. This is the ransom note that the hackers left in the environment. So everyone in the practice knew. They literally walked in Monday morning and found all of their computers with ransom notes all over them. What was the root cause? It's unfortunate, right? This is a preventable event, but this practice had been assured by their IT vendor that their firewalls were properly configured. Upon investigation and confirmed with a forensics investigation, it was determined that the IT vendor did not configure the firewalls properly and left the practice exposed, and the hackers basically walked right through the firewalls. All right, so let's start wrapping up here with the differentials between IT and cybersecurity. So everyone has what I like to call Dave the IT guy. Dave the IT guy is a friend, a family member, someone who has a full-time job but does it part-time for you, or they own an IT company. It doesn't matter. It could be an IT company of 5 people or a couple hundred. And Dave is a trusted person because they've helped you out before. But one of the things I always say is, what are their credentials, right? Are they a board certified / credentialed security engineer? CISSP, HCISPP, these are the 2 primary credentials that security engineers have. The problem in the security world right now is anyone can call themselves a security engineer or security professional, and there's no way to, validate that. You can't call yourself, a doctor without going to dental or medical school, right? It's same concept. But in the cyber world, anyone can hang up a shingle on their website and say they do cybersecurity. So what I like to say is the IT people, companies, I should say, or individuals are typically the generalist. And then the cyber companies are the specialists. And you want to definitely engage a specialist for your cybersecurity needs, right? And the big thing is this trust but verify, right? You can't have an IT company come in and say, hey, I secured your computer or computers, you're good to go. Why? They can't test their own security. It doesn't make any sense. You can't have the person that deployed that technology to protect you test their own security measures. It has to be done by a third party. All right. So by engaging in or with a third party, you're then able to get a true assessment of your practices, right, or your individual computers' security posture, not a hope and a dream, right, or promises that can't be backed up. A real assessment that is not biased in any way. So what are the top 10 ways to build resilient systems? A lot of these we've covered in a lot of detail here, but a couple things I do want to point out. You have to use strong and unique passwords. Never, ever use the same password twice, period. I've seen numerous breaches where people are constantly reusing usernames and passwords. Hackers gain access to their networks because they got the username and password on the dark web. And because the practice or the doctor reused that password, they gained access to their technology. use a password manager, a tool like LastPass, LASTPASS, or Dashlane. These tools will create strong, unique passwords for every website or application used. Turn on MFA, multi-factor authentication. This is where you not only have to enter a username and password, but the website or the application then sends you a text message with a code, or an app pops up on your screen asking you, are you trying to access Chase Bank? And you're like, yes, I am. And you authenticate in. Very powerful for many of the folks on this call who are working off of laptops and, bringing in lots of, X-rays and other data. Make sure your laptop's encryption is turned on. If you have Windows 10 or 11 Professional, that comes built into the device. You can turn that on. What that does is that protects your laptop in the event someone steals your laptop. It won't prevent you from getting ransomware or things like that. But one of the cases we worked probably about 2 years ago was with a radiologist. She was moving from New York to Boston. She left her laptop in her car. As she was unloading her car, moving her stuff up into her new apartment, a criminal came by, saw the laptop sitting on the back seat, stole her laptop with all that patient data. Like, not a good situation from a compliance and legal perspective. If she had just turned on the encryption, which is free, she wouldn't have even had to worry, because the government views encryption as final. You basically can't crack the encryption to get at the data, right? So also consult with, a vendor that you might be a vendor of, like an imaging software, et cetera. Just make sure that encryption is not going to impact their software. You should have backups, right? You should have a hard drive that every couple of days, or even better, every day, you copy all of your data onto that external hard drive and unplug it from your computer. And then the next day, put a second drive on that machine, back it all up. So you're just rotating drives back and forth. One of those drives sits in a drawer or sits in your safe. You need to conduct these security risk assessments, which we talked about. You have to train. I can't emphasize this enough. Training is critical at preventing you from falling victim to these social engineering attacks. You must conduct internal, external vulnerability scans with autonomous remediation, right? That's where we are right now. If you're not doing that, you're missing a huge component from a cybersecurity perspective. We talked about the penetration testing with ethical hackers, this so critical XDR software. One of the really good products out there is a product called SentinelOne. You typically can't buy it yourself. You're going to need to go through a cyber company, to get it. But this is the type of technology that many insurance carriers want. And then, as I alluded to, you need to start seeking out specialists, just like you're a specialist. You need to seek out specialists that only do cyber and they're not generalists. So I do want to take this opportunity to say, once again, thank you so much to See Through Reports. I truly, truly hope everyone gains some great knowledge. Here is a QR code. If you scan that, you'll gain access to my Calendly. I'm an open book. If you have questions, you have concerns, you want to learn more about how to secure your computer or your computers, I am happy to have a candid conversation with you about that. Here's my email address, my phone number. So this is all about education and taking care of folks as well. So please, hit me up if you have any questions, concerns that you would like to discuss. If you have any questions, I'm happy to stay on this call for a few more minutes. There is a chat window if you want to hit that and punch in your questions. I'm happy to address that as much or as needed, I should say. Someone just wrote, that was amazing, Gary, always eye-opening. Thank you so much. All right, so I appreciate that. I'll give it a couple seconds here to see if anyone has any questions, but yeah, go ahead.
No, Gary, I just wanted to thank you. Like, this really was amazing. And I actually have a question on the password app. You mentioned something called LastPass. So do you recommend just storing them in this app, or to have like the suggested complicated passwords?
Okay, so great question. So what LastPass does is it gives you two options. The first option is you can create your own password, and then LastPass will memorize it and store it in its encrypted vault. Or you can say, create a 20 character long password that's upper and lowercase letters, numbers, and special characters, and it will instantly generate that unique password for each website or application you go to. So there are two methodologies. I typically prefer to have LastPass create these complex passwords for me.
Okay.
And I typically, as long as the website allows it, I'll set it to 24 characters, right? It's way more than you need right now, but we also know technology changes quickly. So the standard right now is a minimum of 14 characters, letters, and special characters, numbers, and special characters. So you should do a minimum of 14 of those. That's where it starts to get a little tough to memorize. So
Yeah.
let the password, to answer your question directly, allow the password manager to create those passwords for you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Gary.
Yeah, of
Thank
course. Yeah, thanks, doctor. Okay, well, I don't see any more questions. So once again, thank you so much. I hope you thoroughly enjoyed this and learned something, and stay safe out there. Have a great day. See you.